Thanks for joining us on Shannons Club TV, where we look back on the histories of cars in Australia.
In each episode we find out how our feature car performed both on the road and in competition, and take an up-close look at an owner's well-preserved example.
We'll also get some handy market advice from the Shannons auctions team. So let's take a look at the all-wheel drive Japanese supercar that was at the cutting edge of 1980s high technology. Mitsubishi's Galant VR4.
The 1987 Mitsubishi Galant VR4 for viscous real-time four-wheel drive was the flagship of the company's 6th generation Galant. The 2-litre turbo VR4 with both four-wheel drive and four-wheel steering had been configured to meet the then new Group A regulations of the World Rally Championship, WRC. But arguably it was even more effective as a road car. The VR4 arrived here in mid-1990 when the Falcon had only just acquired a 4-speed automatic transmission and the Commodore used a pushrod American V6. The VR4's technical credentials were itemised beneath the protector strip on the rear doors. Quote, 4WS 2.0i DOHC 16V intercooler turbo, unquote. Cop that. Even so, 0 to 100 kilometres an hour took 7.6 seconds, which, frankly, was not that much quicker than a manual 3.9 litre multi-point injected EA Falcon. But the Galant covered the standing 400 metres in an impressive 15.2 seconds. Mark, I do remember seeing 2 VR4s in the 1992 James Hardy 12 Hour. How did they fare?
Well, they had an uncharacteristically bad race. You know, there were 2 entered in the turbo and four-wheel drive class, but they both suffered all sorts of technical problems which dropped them right down the order and out of contention. Now that was out of character for this car, as we know, and in stark contrast to its impressive international rallying career, which I'll get to a bit later on.
Its four-wheel steering system produced considerable understeer at low speeds, but for such a sporty machine, the VR4 rode beautifully. Double wishbone IRS was very advanced for the day. Mitsubishi's sportiest sedan had great serves of safety, especially when the road conditions or weather deteriorated. High-speed handling was magnificent. But at 1,470 kilos, the hottest Galant was no lightweight. With 148 kilowatts of power, the power-to-weight ratio was good rather than brilliant. Fortunately, its generous torque and well-spaced gear ratios compensated. In 5th gear, the VR4 could get from 100 to 130 in just 7.6 seconds, much quicker than its Subaru Liberty RS Turbo and Celica GT4 rivals. Priced below $40,000, the VR4 was packed with features including climate control air conditioning and adjustable B-pillar belt anchors. In summary, despite being launched in 1987, the Mitsubishi Galant VR4 was a harbinger for the high-tech 1990s. It was a willing sports sedan that proved competent in both rallying and circuit racing. Now, just imagine how good it would have been had it shed 115 kilos to match the Subaru Liberty RS Turbo's curb weight of 1,355. Mark, the late 1980s was a time of immense change in the high-performance car industry, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sure was. And like with the VR4, the highly advanced VR4 was really at the cutting edge of World Rally Championship technology. The Galant VR4 lives in the formidable shadow of its smaller, lighter and faster Lancer Evo replacement, which, with Tommy Mäkinen, achieved unprecedented success for Mitsubishi in the World Rally Championship. However, to remember the 6th generation Galant as primarily the progenitor of the Lancer Evo is to sell it way short. Although it didn't win the WRC, it was a highly successful rally car on a global scale, which included numerous titles in the Australian and Asia-Pacific theatres. Between 1988 and 1992, the Galant VR4 served as Mitsubishi's frontline fighter in the WRC, campaigned by the UK-based factory team Rally Out Europe under Scottish legend Andrew Cowan. It scored a total of 6 WRC round victories, which was 5 more than its similar-sized Subaru Legacy RS rival. The first came in 1989 in Finland for Michael Eriksson, and the last in 1992, when Japanese star Kenjiro Shinazuka claimed his second Ivory Coast victory in Africa. John, it's interesting reflecting on cars like the VR4. You know, Mitsubishi were always a very conservative company. When you look at the hero worship of cars like the WRX compared to something like the VR4, it was a very, very advanced car, but just so understated that people sort of don't really even realise it's there.
Yes, you wonder how Mitsubishi coped with the fact when people hero worship the Evo years later, but they weren't used to that sort of thing. No.
They've always been a very conservative company in the way they've approached it, and probably the most conservative, I think, of the Japanese manufacturers in terms of marketing and that sort of thing.
Yes, I think that's probably right. Yeah.
Closer to home, Western Australian rally great Ross Dunkerton won back-to-back Asia-Pacific Rally Championships for Mitsubishi in the early 1990s, driving Rally Art prepared Group A Galant VR4s. This was at a time when competition in the Asia-Pacific Series was ferocious, as many of the rounds doubled as World Rally Championship rounds. As a result, WRC stars like Colin McRae, Richard Burns and Kenneth Eriksson held Dunkerton in the highest esteem, as they were often outclassed by the Flying West Australian and his Galant VR4s in the daunting and often dangerous Asian events. Another Aussie that starred for Mitsubishi was Ed Ordinsky, the rapid South Australian who was able to extract remarkable speed from a VR4 in showroom stock or Group N trim, dominated the 1990 Australian Rally Championship by winning both the outright title and the Group N crown. In summary, the Galant VR4 achieved an enviable level of success in the WRC and many regional championships that is rarely acknowledged. It was, without question, one of Mitsubishi's and indeed Japan's most versatile and respected rally cars. Remember to join the Shannons Club, where you can connect with other enthusiasts around the country.
My name's Paul Laeth, and today I've got my Galant VR4 1991 model. I've had this car since 1999 and I'm pretty sure I'm the second owner. It appealed to me because nothing had been modified, everything was stock standard. This car is an original, it's got all-wheel drive, centre diff is a limited slip viscous coupling, four-wheel steering, 5-speed gearbox. I got interested in these cars by reading a Shannons review on them. The motor is quite famous, it's a 4G63 motor. Turbocharged, the motor could sit on 7,000 revs all day, every day. Has to be driven maybe a bit slow around the corners, predictable handling, doesn't do anything out of the ordinary, but it can be a very quick car point to point. As an all-wheel drive, this car is incredibly good in the wet. It will not slide, it won't understeer, it won't oversteer. As an enthusiast, I love the way it handles. The best memory of this car I've had is doing the Unidata track. Came back after a 4,000 kilometre trip without a mark, as you can see. I've been a member of Shannons now for 20 years. I have several cars insured with them and also some motorbikes, and they've been fantastic. There's not many cars like this around, completely unmolested. There's a lot of modified ones of these, but this, I think, is a keeper.
Shannon's National Auctions Manager Chris Borrabon is here to bring us up to speed on the Mitsubishi Galant VR4. Welcome, mate.
Hello, Mark. Hello, John.
G'day, Christoph. Very rare car, the Galant VR4, and I'm wondering, do you ever see them at auctions?
Not at auction, we don't, interestingly. I mean, and I think today on the road we don't see many either at all. I mean, you know, what a car in its day. I mean, obviously
phenomenal.
We saw it on a rally scene, WRC scene, for a number of years before it was replaced by the Evo.
And a successful car.
Successful car in its own right.
It had so much equipment packed into it. They needed to bring out a model with longer rear doors so they could ride all the stuff, all the stuff in the one car.
It was incredible. It was very, very advanced for its day. But isn't it interesting though? I always find this with Japanese high-performance cars. Some hit and some miss.
Don't. That's right. You can't pick. You couldn't pick them.
And I look at this car and I say it's so advanced and its performance is terrific. But maybe is it the fact that it's so understated?
It's pretty bland looking.
That if you saw it on the street, you'd say, oh, you wouldn't really know what it was.
It was pretty bland looking.
Yeah, it was.
Is that a factor in its appeal?
I think that's probably a factor, but I also think it's a bit of a sleeper. As you said, you know, it had so much going for it when it came out in '88, and you know, there's so much bells and whistles.
High tech.
Four-wheel drive. We didn't talk about all-wheel drive. It's four-wheel drive, four-wheel steer.
ABS.
Intercooled, you know, intercooled 16-valve engine, the works.
I think what's happened is over the years it's been shadowed by the Lancer Evo. You know, that's probably taking the...
In the same way the Liberty RS is shadowed by the WRS.
Yes.
Whatever was the hero car on the WRC, they seem to cast a huge shadow over what came before.
Well, what they didn't realise early on, the manufacturers, was they've got to make the cars light. So these first cars, the Galant and the Liberty, they're too big for that World Rally championship scene, and so the smaller cars that came later, they became the iconic cars.
Yes, and I think that's what we've seen, but I've got a feeling it's a bit of a sleeper, and I think, you know, a really good original example will probably see some of that flow through, I think. Yeah.
And you know, like, were they modified? Like, if you found one today, you know, were these popular amongst the young set, you know, the guys who want to hot them up or not?
Look, I think there's a number of those that have been modified over the years. Again, you know, bigger turbo, intercoolers,
usual
change of wheels.
Is that acceptable though? Is it collectible or not?
I think it is acceptable. I think, you know, the top of market, you know, where it's going, the demographic of the market, it's acceptable. But I also think, you know, to try and find an original car that's
good luck with that.
Yeah, well maintained, good case. That's something to look at, and that would, you know, probably be a good one to put away.
Well, we are focusing on the car, the first generation, 2-litre turbo. A couple of generations came later with a twin turbo V6. Is the car related to the WRC always going to be more valuable in those later generations that weren't linked to a competition program? Is that usually the way it works in collectors' minds?
You'd think so. You know, that's where it had its impact. You know, that's where it made its mark. So you would think that's where
the one to go for.
The one to go for.
Okay.
But again, you know, let's try and find one. I'm sure there's probably good support in some of the Japanese clubs out there. And it'd be probably a good one to keep an eye on the classifieds for.
I was going to say, so when we talk about sleepers across those three generations, the real sleeper is the first one, isn't it?
Yes.
The 2-litre.
Correct.
Interesting to see where it goes. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Christoph.
And for all the latest on Shannon's auctions, check out the Shannons Club website. For your own competition image of the Mitsubishi Galant VR4, visit AutoPix, Australia's most comprehensive motorsport photo archive. John, it's interesting reflecting on that era because in terms of size, performance, I think the VR4's obvious opposition, in Japanese terms, was the Legacy or Liberty RS. In today's context, which would you prefer?
Well, I'd have the Subaru, but only because of the fantastically charismatic engine sound in the Boxer. But I don't think it was necessarily the better car.
No.
And in some ways, the VR4 had an advantage over it. The gearing was better. And it would have made, either of them would have made a fantastic family car, great for interstate cruising with such reserves of safety.
But isn't that interesting though, when you talk about the X factor, those intangible things that draw people to certain cars? The VR4 was a fantastic car, technologically and performance-wise, but it just doesn't have the same...
It hid its powerful lights under a bushel, really, I think.
And maybe over time, history will judge it fair, and it may well be, as Chris said, a sleeper in the pack.
I think that's very likely.
Hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the Mitsubishi Galant VR4. Hope you can join us next time for Shannons Club TV. Bye for now.